This is George Durkee, and this is the first video for the Columbia College class GIS and Making Maps. In this video, I'm just going to give you guys a very brief introduction to what GIS is and how you can create maps to better visualize data or a particular problem you're trying to solve, or even to tell a story. And in this class, we're using ArcGIS Explorer, which is the free desktop version of their mapping software. And it's a really good program, and as I may have mentioned, it's free. But it's more versatile, I think, than, for instance, Google Earth, which is also a good program, and a lot of you may use that now. But with Arc Explorer, you can not only use a variety of different data types to put in, for instance, GPS tracks, and draw your own tracks and lines, but it has a really extensive collection of base maps, and you can use it in both 2D, just a flat view, and 3D, so you can get a pretty real perspective on terrain. Now, GIS, as you probably already know, and if you've read the introductory chapter in the book that I recommend, is geographic information systems. And I think a lot of people are kind of put off by that. I think there's a little bit of technophobia. You know, GIS becomes kind of scary, connected to computers and difficult data structures and so on. But in fact, if you think of it as an information system that uses geospatial information to represent places on the surface of the Earth, maybe that makes it a little less frightening anyway. And that's all you're doing. You are taking data and you are just making it able to be better visualized. And, you know, it's one of those things, one picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, the same is true in a map. You're putting all sorts of data in there, and you're showing it to people in just one quick picture, and they're able to absorb all of that information, and with any luck, use it to make better decisions. So, for instance, this is something I just did this last weekend. I work a lot in search and rescue, and this was a search we had going on last week down in the southern Sierra. And one of the things in search and rescue is people go out, and nowadays they carry with them a GPS device which keeps a pretty good track log of exactly where they're going. It'll record a point every, whatever you choose, but let's say every 30 seconds or so. So you can see exactly where they've been. And in the old days, searchers would come back in and you'd debrief them, and they'd either describe verbally where they went, or they'd draw it onto a map from memory. And so that wasn't always especially accurate. And so the idea is, as you continue the search, if you don't find the person, you want to see where any holes in the search pattern are. And so the GPS, you know, does a great job of that. So I'm going to close in a little bit here. And so you can see in the purple, that area was pretty well covered. There's a few gaps here and there in the center where my hand tool is pointing, but the terrain's so steep that you know, it's probably not quite as critical. But as we move down here, you'll notice all the red lines covered this whole basin, but there's some pretty good holes right here below the word basin. And then also over here in this big bowl over here, which as it turns out is a is a pass that the individual might have gone over. So that helps the searchers decide for the next day's operation, let's send folks into these holes here and cover those areas, and perhaps cover these areas a little bit better. But when you have limited resources, it's probably reasonable not to send anyone back here. Again, the point here is that you've got a picture of what you actually did. You've projected the data, the track logs, the GPS track logs onto the map, and that helps you visualize and make decisions for the next day. And another map I did quite some time ago, and this was just a personal thing, I was just kind of interested in it, but a book a friend of mine wrote came out a couple of years ago, and in 1833, stay with me here, a guy named Joseph Walker crossed the Sierra. He was one of the first people to do so, and he was a trapper, had about 50 people with him and a couple of hundred horses. And one person left a first-person account of their day-by-day travels. Now, for a long time, it was believed that Walker crossed over through Yosemite and was one of the first people to see Yosemite Valley. But this friend of mine, a historian and geographer, read it and was kind of bothered by the original account compared to Walker being able to get to Yosemite and cross there. And there were a number of specific points that didn't make sense. And as you read through the account, there's a couple of identifiable areas. And so, without going into too much detail, one, Walker almost certainly came out at a grove of giant sequoias. And so that limits where they came out to about 3 places between Yosemite to the south and Lake Tahoe to the north. And then there were an equal couple of places on the east side of the Sierra and some descriptions of canyons. And you had to string all these together, and they all had to make internal sense. So anyway, working with the author, we went over putting all these places together, and I placed pins at some of the identifiable places, and then using 3D imagery, I just started drawing a line through a couple of logical routes, and and using the 3D ability of Arc Explorer. And you'll notice here you can tilt and turn around. You've got to do it very carefully, because if you do things too fast, things just get away from you. So you can tilt the perspective, and you can close in. And sometimes it hangs up as it's trying to rebuild there. And you can close in and get a better idea of terrain. So anyway, I just did this map here to help us visualize where Joseph Walker and his crew were. Interestingly, they got to the Sierra in September and described like 10 and 15 feet of snow they were crossing up along the top here. And these days you don't find that much snow anymore, but the Sierra was just emerging from what was called the Little Ice Age. And so they were not having a good time. They were pretty hungry. They were eating their horses. Gnarly dudes. Anyway, it was just an interesting thing to do, and you can fly over the terrain there's actually a feature in Arc where if you draw a line, you can set it to follow that at a given speed, and I will spare you guys from watching that. But that's an interesting feature that Arc Explorer has. And then a couple other things that I'm just going to show here as, if I can find them, as things you can do with maps. A classic is, here's a map of mountain biking trails. And this is actually something you can do even with Arc Explorer. Something like this you might want to do with ArcGIS 10, which is another class I teach, and the college has several on-campus classes that are just excellent for learning ArcGIS 10. But anyway, these are maps you can put together to, if your community or you have a bunch of friends and you want to start mapping bike trails or hiking trails you've done, then just throw a GPS into your pack or use your phone. There's a lot of good GPS phone apps out there. Keep track of the trails you use, and then you can project those onto a map. And so you can share those either online or by email or something, so that everybody can see the same terrain. And the idea of a map, of course, is, well, there's a lot of ways to present a map, but you might want to present the terrain and show the vertical and how hard something might be. You want to show place names, but in this case, they're emphasizing the actual trails. So those are shown in bold colors, and they've faded the background, keeping the contour lines, the elevation lines, but not showing much else of the actual terrain, which is common in a USGS type map. And so again, it's a quick way to show information. You can see the legend there, which shows ski trails and sections of the ski trail that are double track, which is when you set a ski trail to have 2 tracks so that you can do passing, and so people can come the other way sometimes. So that's a pretty good map. And there's another one here, if I can find it. That's not it. Everybody hang on. No. Don't worry about a thing, folks. I'm a professional. Well, I had one here. Let's make it smaller and see if I can. I think we're going to have to do without it. I had one here of the Rim Trail, which is a favorite map of mine. But I guess we're going to skip it this session. Well, it's back to that earlier search. Here's the tracks of the helicopter on the first day of the search, and so that's also pretty useful when you're trying to decide where to fly terrain the next day. We'll make one more try here for that map. No, it's not there. Bike trail, no. Okay, well, sorry, can't find it. Anyway, I'll show it in a future video because it's a pretty good video, or I'm sorry, still map. Anyway, the point of all this is, as you take this course, start thinking about your day-to-day job or interests or what you want to do in the future, and start thinking about how maps and data combined can help you to illustrate either information you want to pass on to people, or you have a specific problem and how you might use maps to to solve that problem, or at least to be able to analyze what's going on and see better solutions. Okay, well, thanks for taking the class, and we'll have another 1 or 2 videos next week. Be sure to get a hold of me if you have questions or ideas of stuff you want to cover. Thanks.